And welcome everyone. Who do I have on the telephone lines?
Brian Jacobs.
Trustee Jacobs, welcome.
Yeah, it's the two teachers.
Trustee Swan, are you there?
It's about two positions. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to welcome everyone to the May 23rd, 2018 public session, and I'm going to ask us to stand for the singing of O Canada. Okay, Director, I'll ask you to do a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, trustees. This is our roll call for our meeting of 23 May 2018. Trustee Armour.
Present.
First Vice Chair Karkner.
Present.
Trustee Cram.
Present.
Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Wendy McPherson.
Present.
Trustee Bill McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald. Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
Student Trustee Marshall Wilson.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You have quorum.
Thank you very much. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve consent agenda item 3.02 to 3.03, May 23rd, 2018, as submitted. Moved by Trustee Cram, seconded by Trustee Richards. And I'll ask you to cast your votes, please. I better join the meeting. And that carries. Thank you very much. Do I have any conflict of interest declarations? Seeing there are none, before we move into the first item, I'm going to ask Superintendent Jeremy Hobbs if he could do something for us at this point in time. So I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Hobbs.
I certainly would be pleased to do something for you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the board tonight for taking a few minutes out of the schedule to highlight the career of my good friend and colleague, Mr. Peter Bosch, who's joined us tonight. This is a surprise to Peter, so he thought he was here to talk about paving. And he'd be certainly really happy to do that anyway. I'd like to just, it's a great opportunity because Peter is celebrating 30 years of service with the board, and I received his 30-year pin through HR earlier this spring, and felt it would be a great opportunity to really highlight his career in a public setting. So thank you very much to the board for allowing me to take these few minutes. Peter has worked in almost every capacity in the facilities department, starting out all the way back as a custodian in the SG&G board. He claims to have been an IT person at one point, which I still dispute, but he has a suspicious knowledge of IT. He's lived, I think, in every community in the board, which we talked about the other day. He's worked his way up through the chain, accumulating an astonishing wealth of technical experience. And anybody who's worked with Peter would know that it's almost inconceivable that anybody can be that conversant on that many technical subjects. But he also comes with an abundance of wisdom, which has been an incredible benefit to me and to the board. Today, as you know, he's responsible for our burgeoning capital projects. He's done everything from helping communities figure out how to install a new flagpole for their memorial to the upcoming design for the $53 million replacement of CCVS and St. Lawrence Intermediate School. I've worked closely with Peter for over 10 years now, and I'm not certain that either one of us was super enthusiastic about our partnership in the early days, but I am proud to say that I can hardly now think of a problem that I wouldn't want to solve with Peter's knowledge and wisdom and his sort of gentle touch. Together we've mused over jigs and jogs. These are some inside things, but we've mused over jigs and jogs. We've walked fish habitat together. We've counted butternut trees and figured out how to store sewage at the start of a school year so we can get a school open. Most recently, we've taken away Peter's ruler. We gave him some colored pencils and let him go at designing the new canopy for TIS. And if you've driven by, you see it's pretty colorful and curvy. So that's really great. Peter's a great colleague. He's a great partner. He's been a guide and, in fact, a mentor to me as I've come to learn the ropes and facilities. And I really look forward to continuing to work with him on the amazing capital program in front of us. So I'd just like to say thank you, Peter, and congratulations.
Peter, it'd be an understatement to say that we're not proud of you. Any contact that I've ever had with you, I've always walked away in awe of your knowledge, and you've got a great sense of humor. I think you have to be able to work. I wish I could be around for your 40th, but I didn't realize we were hiring kids at 10. Congratulations, and thank you so much for everything you've done for us. And we're not talking about paving tonight, just so you know.
Maybe he is.
But we could if you want to hang around. Okay. Okay, I have a report to the board from private session and at its committee of the whole meeting in private session May the 9th, 2018. One litigation matter was discussed and no recommendations were brought forward to the board. So that brings us to our next item, which is South Edwardsburg Public School, and we're looking at listening to their student achievement and their school improvement plan for student achievement and wellness. I'm going to ask Superintendent Ferguson if he'll introduce Principal Chris Bourne.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. So yes, I'd like to welcome Principal Chris Bourne to the table. Mr. Bourne is new to the school as of January this year. Some of you may be thinking, I'm not sure that's right. I thought Mr. Bourne's been there a lot longer. That's because he replaced a Mr. Bourne. It's not often that our transitions go so smoothly that we're able to place a principal with the exact same name in a school, but it saves all sorts of costs on door plate, nameplates, and school letterhead. So it was actually a very wise decision. And he had big shoes to fill, John Bourne shoes, but I'm happy to report that Chris Bourne has filled those shoes and has done some great things and continued the work that John Bourne started there. So I'll hand things over now to the new Mr. Bourne.
Thank you, Superintendent Ferguson, and through you, Chair. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to give the board a snapshot of what we are about at South Edwardsburg Public School. We are located near the banks of the beautiful St. Lawrence River and serve the communities of Cardinal and Johnstown. This is the first year in which the student populations of both Benson Public School and South Edwardsburg Public School have been amalgamated. Our current population is 145 students with a staff of 20 caring individuals, consisting of 10 teachers, 5 educational assistants, 2 early childhood educators, and 2 support staff. We have a strong relationship with Educare, our daycare provider, and they offer both full day and before and after school care for our communities. As Mr. Ferguson said, I was transitioned to South Ed in January of this year, and I've been so fortunate to continue the excellent work that the other Mr. Bourne started. The staff, students, and parent community have been so incredibly welcoming to me, and I consider myself extremely fortunate to work in such a great school. We're also very excited about the school building improvements scheduled for this summer and the yard beautification project that we've embarked on with our school council. So looking at our EQAO scores, the chart represented on the slide shows the historical numbers for both South Edwardsburg and Benson Public School. You'll notice that most of the results, in addition to all of the results from last year, were not reported as the number of students writing the test at each site was so small that identification of individual students' results might be possible. But by combining the results from both Benson and South Edwardsburg, the increased number of students writing the assessment allows me to show the results of what they would have been, and those results are shown on that bottom table. In reading, we had 71% of our grade 3 students and 85% of our grade 6 students performing at or above provincial standard. In writing, we had 86% of our grade 3s and 100% of our grade 6 achieving at or above the standard. We're pleased with our past literacy results, but still recognize that there is room for improvement. In planning for this year's literacy focus, we used pre-assessments and observations to determine that writing was an area for work for our current grade 3 and 6 cohort. We continued the reading strategies that were implemented from last year's SIPSA work while focusing on writing with our students. With respect to our math scores, we had 43% of our grade 3s and 38% of our grade 6 achieve at or above the provincial standard. With such a large disparity between where we are and where we want to be, we decided to focus our mathematics work on a large area of concern that spreads across numerous areas of the curriculum, namely problem-solving strategies. So in regards to our literacy focus SIPSA, we've been using the Ontario Writing Assessment as our diagnostic tool to inform our direction for explicit teaching on sentence and paragraph structure. Our two focus classrooms were a grade 1-2 split and a grade 2-3 split class. For the grade 1-2 class, we administered that test to help develop a baseline for where we were at, then used daily exercise focusing on writing 5-star sentences to address what we perceived as gaps. The students were actively involved in self-assessing their work using checklists and anchor charts. We then gave another assessment to help us understand our progress. We used a score of 3 out of 5 on the 5-star sentence as our provincial standard measure. It's not exactly perfect, but it gave us a pretty good idea of how students were doing. In a short time, we saw an increase from 41% to 65% of our students reaching that mark of what we assumed would be the provincial standard. We similarly saw the percentage of students who achieved a 0 or a 1 out of 5, so students that were yet to grasp the concepts of sentence structure, drop significantly, from 42% of the class to when we did our post-assessment, only 18%. We are now establishing focus groups that will address the specific needs of students in those classes. In the grade 3-4 class, we were still looking at sentence structure, but also expanded it into paragraph structure. Students were offered a variety of graphic organizers to help them structure their thoughts before writing, and we explicitly taught lessons on brainstorming strategies, narrowing down ideas, and paragraph structure, while still focusing on those 5-star sentences. Looking at the results between the pre and post assessment, we did not see a significant change in the number of students at or above the provincial standard, but we did see a significant percentage of students increase the results, with a large group, 39% of our students in that class, sitting at a level 2. When we looked further into the data, we discovered that there were significant improvements in both brainstorming and topic development with this group, with the issues being the area of sentence structure. So going back to that sentence structure. So now we'll be working with students on self-assessment of sentence structure through the use of anchor charts and checklists. So when we look at math, we chose the area of problem solving based on an analysis of our EQAO results and teacher observations. What we were finding was that students were having difficulties finding the appropriate information in the problem and then organizing their thoughts to follow the appropriate steps to solve it. Problem solving had the additional benefit of being a skill that translated to all grades, so our approach could be implemented in both classes with minimal adjustments. In both of our focus classes, teachers introduced a common problem solving template and modeled its use explicitly in a number of different activities. This gave the students the opportunity to gain more knowledge and familiarity with how to properly structure an answer. Students then had numerous opportunities to demonstrate how to use that template in class. Teachers were looking for signs of improvement in the areas of understanding and pulling out the important information, being able to use that template appropriately to follow a process towards the answer, and finally being able to calculate the correct solution. As you can see from the chart, the improvement in both classes was significant. In the grade 2-3 class, we had a 50% increase in the ability to find the important information, so it was up to 94% of the students, as well as follow a process towards the solution, so that was up to 84%. We also had 56% of our students find the correct answer to that problem, compared to just 13% when we first started. In the grade 5-6 class, we saw similar improvements with 50% increase in finding the correct information, almost a 30% increase in the ability to follow an organized process towards the answer, and that was up to 54%. And finally, almost 50% in the ability to find the correct answer. From this data, we have now adjusted the layout of our template based on student feedback, and teachers have started to add EQAO example questions and problems to the mix of questions to begin getting students familiar with that type of question. Our long-term plan is that students will be provided an increasingly sparser template until they can create it themselves and follow those same steps. We're also moving through the different strategies of solving problems with each grade using the Problem Solver resource. It's a math resource that we have, and we're applying those strategies to our template. In the area of wellness, our main wellness goal for South Ed involves a school-wide implementation of the zones of regulation. We have 2 teachers currently using the system 100% of the time with their classes, and the results have been dramatic in both an increase in appropriate classroom behavior as well as a drastic reduction in office referrals. These staff members, along with our student support partner, have adapted the program for their particular classroom and have had success in having parents buy into the program using the same program language at home for continuity. We're now working at effectively sharing that expertise throughout the school by providing time for staff to spend observing how the program is implemented in the classroom and by purchasing additional resources so that all staff can be informed on how to use the program most effectively. We are looking forward to aggressively expanding what we are doing in the next short while. We also incorporate the WITS program for conflict resolution for our students and are creating student wellness activity centers for the next school year. In these bi-weekly centers, students will work through activities based on the WITS program, zones of regulation, and then various stress reduction and relaxation techniques. In addition, we'd all agree that it's very difficult to learn when you are hungry. Therefore, South Ed has a close partnership with Nutrition for Kids, which provides support for our numerous nutrition initiatives. These involve Fruit Fridays, where each class receives a large tray of fresh fruit, and Breakfast Tuesdays, where all students receive a breakfast burrito in addition to our daily snack bins in each classroom. South Ed has an extensive hot lunch menu run by school council that provides variety and nutrition for our students. In the area of athletics, we have a full schedule of intramurals at lunch to complement our sports teams. Over the course of the year, we've had volleyball, floor hockey, basketball, handball, running club, and we will be participating in some flag football in June. Finally, we've ensured that we've used student voice, and that's been at the center of our school rebranding efforts, with students being involved in the process of choosing our new school nickname, logo, and colors. South Ed has a very active and involved and supportive school council who do an excellent job of supporting our students and staff, as well as helping us connect our school with the local community. We've had tremendous support from our local business community with the initiatives that we have been a part of, and that is continuing currently with our yard beautification project. South Ed staff and students are also actively involved in a number of worthy causes, including Sundays for the Cancer Society, Crazy Sock Dance Party for World Down Syndrome Day, Jump Rope for Heart Day, Track and Field for C4K, and the Spirit of Giving at Christmas time. We also have continued a relationship with Started at Benson with Ingredient Canada and Cardinal. And their support has allowed us to offer some very special events for our students, including a Christmas dinner with all the fixing, as well as a pizza party and a poster contest in conjunction with our Earth Day cleanup activities in both of the communities we serve. We are proud to represent both Cardinal and Johnstown as a school, and we look forward to continuing our current relationships with both communities and to create new relationships as we move forward together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to open it up to comments and questions, but I'm going to begin with Trustee Swan.
Hello. I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight, Chris. I just want to say you've done a great job transitioning in your new role, and I think the community is happy to have you. It's a beautiful school and a wonderful community, and you've really helped take amalgamation an extra step further with your staff with the change. Change always is going to bring new ideas, and I think you've brought them to the school. I also want to thank you for any time I've had concerns. You've quickly acted on them, and I think in the benefit of the students, and I think that's really important. I hope you stay there for a while. I've had nothing but positive feedback from the parent community and also the local community about the school and how it's coming along. So anyway, I guess lastly I want to say is student voice is really important. And even before you were there, I know you mentioned it, that the students picked the new logo for the amalgamation. So it was the Rockets and the Bears coming together, and there was a contest, I think, for it. And I think the students really appreciate having their voice heard, and I know it's still being heard in other areas. And I'm glad you and your staff are listening to our students, because that's what we're there for. So anyway, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Trustee Swan. I'm going to open it. I told Principal Bourne that we would have some challenging questions for him. I'm just going to open it up to the floor if anyone would like to ask questions or have a comment. Trustee Cram.
Are you ready? Through you, Chair. Can you give us examples of how the WITs and the zones of regulation have been implemented in the school, and what kinds of differences you found because of that?
Through you, Chair. Zones of regulation and WITs were quite new to me, coming from the high school side of things to the elementary side. And I know my first meeting with the other Mr. Bourne was kind of, oh, what are all these different programs that I just hadn't had exposure to on the secondary side? If I start with the zones first, the zones of regulation, we've used it in two of our more challenging classrooms where there have been some behavior issues in the past. The turnaround is remarkable. It's night and day. To see some of these students that in the past may have had some trips to the office or kind of conflict with teachers or with other staff members in the building, to hear them using the expected behavior and unexpected behavior language and the different zones that I'm in, and how is this situation making me feel, and what do I need to do, what strategies do I need to employ to get back to the green zone, which is a big thing in the zones of regulation, is astounding, coming from a different spot where I hadn't seen it in action. It has been so transformative that I use it at home with my own child all the time. And my wife kind of rolls her eyes a little bit as I'm using all this language that she isn't familiar with, and it works for her as well. It's quite a program, and because of the success, we do want to implement it further. And our staff has noticed the difference in those couple classes, and so they're extremely eager to kind of get involved and to kind of find out what the program is all about and how to properly implement it in their class. For the WITs we're looking at, it's more conflict resolution. So WIT stands for walk away, ignore, talk it out, or find help, essentially. So it is amazing for the little conflicts that happen out on the schoolyard and stuff to talk kindergartens, grade ones, kind of through this conflict resolution and, well, what can we do? We can do this and that, and they're all very familiar with the program and how to actually use it. And I would say the number of conflicts that don't get to me because our students are familiar with the program is quite amazing, coming from a different side of things. So that's the success of the program. It speaks for itself, and the staff have noticed it. And me coming in as an outsider kind of to it was quite remarkable. So that's why we're continuing it.
Just to follow up, Chair, thank you. It's nice to see that elementary school can still teach a secondary person something.
Every day.
We got to get back in the green zone. Trustee McPherson.
I had two questions and a comment, but I believe Trustee Swan answered part of my question. During the transition when you amalgamate schools, you quite often try to bring some of the culture and identity from the school that is being closed into the one that is being consolidated with. Was there anything else done besides the logo competition? Memorabilia or something like that? Through the chair.
Through you, Chair. That is a fantastic question. Thanks for allowing me to kind of highlight some of the things that we've done to try and ease the change. Because as Trustee Swan said, change is hard for everyone and it takes time to heal. And it hasn't been any different kind of in the Cardinal and the Johnstown area. So we are ensuring that as we go forward, we're developing new traditions. We are a new school. We're not South Edwardsburg that brought Branson over. We're not Benson. We're in the new South Edwardsburg. So it's really important that as we go forward with all the traditions and events that we would hold in a school, that we're doing them together as this is the new school, and we're kind of bringing the best from both worlds together. So we've really been ensuring that we're involving both communities. So we still did the skating in Cardinal, which was something that had been done at Benson for years. So we bussed our students over. For our community cleanup day for Earth Day, we actually cleaned up both communities. So we sent half our students to Cardinal and the other half stayed in Johnstown to clean up that way. When we have school trips that are actually outside of the school hours, we ensure that we have a Johnstown drop-off and a Cardinal drop-off to help make it easier for parents. School council has been amazing coming together, kind of because we are fairly evenly split between the previous two schools on the new school council, and they have come together, united sort of thing, to help serve our students that we have at South Edwardsburg, and put that first, and how we can best benefit all the students that we have at South Edwardsburg. We did do the logo in school colors. Really, our hope is that parents in the community see South Ed as a place that loves their kid and cares for their child, and they want to send their child there. And I do think we're making significant progress in that area.
Okay. I'm particularly impressed with slide number 5. Does a question, is this a standalone process at your school, or is this a process that's being shared at other schools? When you see that you've gone from 9% to 57% finding the correct answer, that's a substantial jump in math. And I guess my question's a little bit open-ended. And again, I'll get my comment in before you answer. I'd just like to remind the Board of Trustees that Chris actually cut his eye teeth at PDCI. And if he's successful at South Ed, it's largely because he was such a success in Lanark County. Now, back to the question.
Do you remember the question now?
I do. So through you, Chair. It is a great question about the math, and I have to give the credit where it deserves, and that would be with our Superintendent Allen, Superintendent Barrett, and the RMS team, Principal Shelley Corleone. We are part of the RMS working group that get together, and the templates that we're using are actually templates that we have gained from that professional development experience. So we are actually taking that from those RMS days and implementing it in our classroom, and it's been hugely beneficial for us, not just to get the resources, but actually get the training on how to use it in the class and what it would look like. And I do believe there are other schools in the board that would be using templates, if not exactly the same, very similar. The original template we had, we just adjusted a little bit because the student voice kind of told us they didn't like how boxes were a certain way, so we just rejigged the boxes. The same information was there, but they just found it flowed a little easier that way. But yeah, the results have been astounding. So we'll be putting that across for all our classes next year, with the end goal being that they won't need this template anymore. Once they've used it enough and be able to actually think their way through that word problem, the word problem is not the scary thing anymore. It's just the math problem that they know they can do, and that's the end goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Trustee Kirkman.
Thank you. I have a question and then a comment. So through the chair, I'd like to ask Chris, your classes this year, are they large enough that they're single classes, or you have splits?
We do have, through you, Chair.
Make up the classes.
In the upcoming year, we're going to have some splits and some straight grades. We have an anomaly where we have 2 grades that are extremely tiny in numbers. So as they travel through the school, through the cohort, it means we'll have to juggle a little bit each year to actually make the numbers work in each class. We do end up with about 20 students per class is our average, a little under 20, which is a fantastic size. It also sometimes there is benefits on using the splits, sometimes to separate certain students that are better separated. Sometimes it's if a student needs a little bit extra time at one grade level or is ready to move up a little bit. So there is some benefit to it. But definitely with these 2 very small grades moving through, it does kind of make it a little more difficult to run straight grades, because we do have a couple of grades that are a lot bigger and then a couple that are smaller. On average we're 20, but it's just kind of a weird demographic.
And my comment is at the retirement party we had the other day, honoring our retiring employees, I had the pleasure of sitting beside a retiree and her husband, and he started, small talk, and I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Cardinal." And his grandchildren were living there, and I said, "Oh, the children have now moved to the new South Ed school." "Yes," and he says, "and they're very happy. So thank you for what you've done." He knew He knew that there was a lot of upheaval in the town of Benson, or in Cardinal, with Benson closing, but he was very grateful that the opportunities that they're getting at South Ed are more than what they were able to have at Benson. So that's thanks to you, to John, and to you, Chris, for doing that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, Chris, thank you. It's obvious just listening to you that you're bringing such experience to that community, but your personality is you can just see it. It just oozes out of you. I also want to thank you for the work you do with Student Senate as well. You're a great representative there. Thank you so much, and safe travels home. Okay, moving to the next. We're moving into a private session. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board move into Committee of the Whole, May the 23rd, 2018 at 7 o'clock. Moved by Trustee McAllister, seconded by Trustee Cram. And just a show of hands. Thank you very much. So we're going to go into private session for a few minutes, and we'll come and get everyone when we're finished.
Can I ask
Barry and I were chatting last time we were in the airport about how you're not Barry. Yeah. Murray. Barry. Murray.
New man, really?
Yeah, that was the last I saw you with.
Thank you very much. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board move back into regular board meeting May the 23rd, 2018 at 7:20 p.m. Moved by Trustee Cartner, seconded by Trustee Cram. Thank you. And just a show of hands will be fine. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next action item, I'm going to turn this over to the SEAC Chair, Trustee Bill McPherson, who's going to give a report of the Special Education Advisory Committee, SEAC.
Thank you. We met on May 15th. We delayed our May meeting in order to accommodate the timelines for the presentation of the budget. SEAC did review the draft presentation of the special education budget presented by Carol McCune and Tracy Meyer. Basically, we looked at confirmed funding, although, as with any draft document, additions are possible during the school year. We did have a projected enrollment increase of 146 students. I'm not starting to steal anybody's thunder here, but I'm just reading this off as presented. Basically, it was met with favor. There was some vigorous discussions, and there was a motion came forward as a result of that discussion, which I will present to you at the end of my presentation. I'm going to jump to, we are planning to live stream our June meeting, and it would be my hope that you would all skip the baseball game that night and tune us in. If you really aren't doing anything, drop in and make our sparse little crowd look a little more crowded. This is the first for a SEAC, and probably first in Ontario. We just felt that some of the things that we get at SEAC are really important, and we would like to attempt to share them. Director Sliwa was there as well. He's soon going to qualify for honorary membership. And we went over the engagement on government supports report. Talked about the code of conduct, trustee honorarium, electronic meeting participation, student trustee, and the director of education qualifications. Then we had the superintendent's report. We actually were quite busy that night. And we talked about professional activity day, the teacher and support staffing, transition support at both the from schools that are emerging as well as the ones that are going from one school system to the other. We talked about the CF funding ministry report, the IEP tool review. Then we noted that there will be no December meeting this year in regards to the organization of the Board of Trustees. Back to the motion. Moved by Shelley Graham, seconded by David Terrence, that SEAC recommends that the Upper Canada District School Board of Trustees approve the draft special education budget and staffing level expenses of $49,206,896 as presented to SEAC on May 15, 2018 for the 2018-19 fiscal year. That motion is carried. Thank you. And back to the chair.
Thank you, Trustee McPherson. Do we have any comments or questions? Trustee Carter?
When is the June meeting?
5th of June, first Tuesday of the month.
June 5th? Okay, so we'll all be here? Or watching it. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to the next item is the 2018-19 proposed budget, and before I do that, I have a motion that I need to put on the table. It's that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the 2018-19 annual projected operating expenses in the amount of $370,000 $370,420,818, and capital disbursements of $44,753,157, plus all additional amounts subsequently allocated by the ministry. I need a mover. Trustee Bill McPherson, and a seconder. Trustee Karkner. Thank you. So the motion's on the floor. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Baxter.
Okay, then. Are we running that from here? Carol, you want to do this? Just introduce Carol McEwen, who's our Comptroller of Finance.
Welcome, Carol.
And Michael Law in the background, who is our manager. And they both had a lot to do with getting the budget to you in May, and joined by Diana Kingston. Okay, so I'll just start talking about the PowerPoint, and we'll walk our way through it. You have in front of you the PowerPoint, and you also have a booklet, and it's familiar to you because it's the same format as you've had in previous years. Okay. We are pleased to be able to bring to you this evening the proposed 2018-19 budget for the Board of Trustees deliberation. Tonight's presentation is the third in a series of budget-related reports that have been shared with trustees, each one building on the previous and providing budget information as it became available and while the proposed budget was being developed. Despite the delayed release of the Grants for Student Needs, the GSNs, and the budget forms, multiple grant changes, and the continued implementation of the centrally negotiated 2017-19 labor agreements, the finance team has now consolidated the various expense budget submissions of all Upper Canada budget owners, compared to all revenues, incorporated the budgets of all our related parties, and has a clear picture of the proposed budget for 2018-19. Various budget expense pressures for 2018-19 fiscal year were identified early in 2018, and the senior team has been preparing by developing expense reductions throughout the spring. While these efforts have been successful in mitigating the budget impact of these pressures for the organization, the resulting bottom line projected deficit as measured for the compliance purposes, the projected deficit as measured for compliance purposes by the Ministry of Education. Despite the projected deficit, the proposed budget in relation to the board's operating allocation and its accumulated surplus available for compliance is considered Ministry of Education compliant. This is an operational plan, and as the next school year unfolds and as new information comes to light, adjustments will be required, always with student learning a priority as we focus on our mission of preparing all students for a successful life. Trustees also have in their agendas a full detailed package, as I mentioned, that includes many schedules that provide the specific monetary amounts that are the basis of the presentation. These schedules provide supporting details to the presentation, comparisons of the proposed original budget 2018, which we put together, to the approved original budget 2017-18. And we make a point of saying that because we're not comparing to the revised estimate of 2017-18, which this Board of Trustees approved last June, are provided along with variance explanations. I'll now take you through the presentation. Okay, we start as usual with where we are in the financial cycle, as highlighted by the blue square, which also indicates that the 2018-19 budget is due at the Ministry of Education by June 29th. I would like at this point to recognize, and I've already talked about this, commend the financial team, of which I'm very proud, for having this budget ready for this May meeting. The financial cycle you see shows that they did this even though they just completed and submitted to the ministry a 7-month report. And that's because the ministry has a March 31 year end, and they want to know how much we spent in the first 7 months of our year so that they can include it in their year end, which is a mini year end. As well, they have also been preparing for the development of financial forecast number 3, which will come to the board at the second meeting in June. Other priority projects have also impacted on staff availability. Slide 3. This slide is key in terms of relaying the context within which the budget has been developed and the approach taken. Given the role of our student enrollment in the calculation of our ministry funding, it is important to note that the draft budget has been completed based upon the projected 2018 enrollment, as developed by our planning department as at April 6, 2018. As is our practice, this budget reflects only announced grants with confirmed dollar values for our board. Examples of grants that were received in the 2017-18 fiscal year that have not yet been confirmed for our board in 2018-19 include the Teacher Learning and Leadership, Transition to Autism, and Autism PD and training programs. And we're not saying that those aren't going to come in, they just haven't come in yet. When they do come in, they'll probably be picked up in a revised estimate. As noted earlier, the year-over-year analysis contained in this presentation is based upon a comparison of data contained in the 2017-18 original budget versus the data in the proposed 2018-19 budget. As well, the components of the second year of 2017-19 central labor agreements have been incorporated. These components include salary benefits, benchmark increases, class size investments, transformations to the new employee life, health, and dental trust, and the local priorities funding. Slide 4. And these are some of the local budget pressures. Special education, we will be discussing special education in more depth later in the presentation. However, due to the combination of declining funding in the special education area and a continued increase in the needs of the students, this is an area of the board that has created financial pressures for the board over the last 5 years. While trustees will see that the ministry funding in 2018-19 is anticipated to increase, we projected that expenses will continue to grow at a higher rate than the funding. Student transportation. Costs related to transporting our students to from school are anticipated to outpace ministry funding. This is a situation not unique to our board and is being witnessed across the province due to negotiations or requests for proposals. Staff absence replacement costs. Similar to what has been happening in other areas of the province, staff absent replacement costs at Upper Canada have been steadily rising each year. For example, we have experienced an overall average increase of 23% in our classroom sick day absences over the last 5 years. Slide 5. So our projected enrollment. These projected enrollment figures reflect both pupils of the board, upon which the ministry grants are based, as well as tuition fee-paying students. Think about First Nations and international students. Trustees will see that while the secondary panel has begun to stabilize, enrollment at the elementary level has continued its pattern of a return to the growth before it began in the 2017-18 year. And the growth began at that time. Our adult and continuing education other enrollment is anticipated to see a decline year over year in 2018-19, the bulk of which is in the areas of adult day school and continuing education. And this follows on what we saw in the revised estimate for 2017-18. Slide 6, the revenue. Trustees may recall from the budget presentation that was shared on April 25th that some of the new and enhanced grants had been identified based on the information available at that time. Much of that information, along with projected enrollment data, are now reflected in this slide. The first row, ministry grant allocation, or JSNs, show a net increase of $9.5 million, which is comprised of the net impact of both grant increases and decreases. Significant components of this increase include enrollment-driven change, added $1.3 million. New grants in 2018-19 added $1.3 million. These include supports in special education, student transitions, and class size investments. Salary and benefits, non-salary and benefit benchmarks, and grant restructuring added $6.9 million. Example of a non-salary and benefits benchmark change would be the continued phase-in of updated 2011 NHS survey data. An example of grant restructuring would be the transfer of an autism EPU grant into the GSN in 2018-19. Provincial grants other includes EPOs as well as grants from other provincial ministries, example Ministry of Colleges and Universities. This line reflects an increase of $1.6 million now versus the same time last year. This increase is due primarily to an increase in ministry supports in the areas of specialists, high skills major, highly skilled workforce, and mental health workers. Funding for French as a second language has been included in the 2018-19 budget, which has not been included in 2017-18. However, this was ultimately received in 2017-18 and is not new this coming year. And as noted earlier, the increase on this line is partially offset by EPO grants that were included in the 2017-18 budget but have not yet been confirmed for 2018-19. A small decrease in First Nations projected enrollment accounts for most of the decrease in federal fees. Investment income change is negligible and is dependent upon bank account balances. Revenue from other school boards will see a significant decrease in 2018-19 related to the sale of the General Vanier site in Cornwall. 2017-18 revenue include a reimbursement of shared usage costs of the General Vanier site from our English coterminous board. The next line projects a reduction in revenue from other sources, a portion due to the additional salary and benefit release time and secondment revenue, offset by an anticipated decrease in related third-party revenue for the Upper Canada Leisure Centre, UCLC, and the Champions for Kids. Deferred capital contributions is simply bringing revenue in which was previously deferred to match the estimated depreciation of our support assets. The increase is related to full-year depreciation expenses related to 2017 additions and additional planned capital spending during 2018-19. The first year the assets are brought on, we get half a year of depreciation, no matter if they start at the beginning of the year or end of the year. And finally, school-generated funds predict a slight increase in fundraising revenue. This increase in revenue will be partially offset by an increase in expense, which we'll see on slide 7. Moving on to planned expenses, since such a large portion, 75 to 80% of the board's operating budget relates to employee salary and benefit costs, the negotiated and funded increases in salaries and the associated benefit costs have a significant impact on the board's expenses. That is particularly evident in the instruction line, since it is heavily weighted with staff costs. This line reflects salary and benefit benchmark increases for teachers, educational assistants, principals, vice principals, school office staff, and other salaries, both permanent and casual, considered by the ministry to be directly connected with instruction. Also of note, our increase in both teacher and educational assistant staffing within the special ed area, additional guidance staffing, increased absence replacement costs, incremental staffing funded by EPOs and other provincial grants, increased salary and benefit expenses funded by increased ministry benchmark rates, reductions in specialized equipment amount, SIA funded technology. The projected increase in administration and governance expenses is also attributable mainly to the funded salary increases, associated benefits, and any grid movements. The transportation line reflects incremental expenses partially funded by the 4% cost update increase, which is an increase from 2% in 2017-18, and a decrease in planned administrative expenses. Moving to the pupil accommodation row, this decrease is due primarily to a reduction in expenses related to the sale of General Vanier and a reduction in interest expenses. Other non-operating shows a minimal change. The amortization expense shows an increase due to higher planned capital spending this upcoming year, with almost all offset by the deferred capital contribution revenue that we already saw in the previous slide. Lastly, a small increase in the spending of school-generated funds, which includes field trips and excursions, is projected for 2018-19. We saw an increase in this revenue in the previous slide, resulting in a combined increase in the net school-generated funds in-year surplus. Overall, we see a significant increase in planned expenses, over $2.4 million, that's at the bottom in the middle, over $2.4 million greater than the increase in revenue. You will see in the next couple of slides that planned special education spending is a significant contributor to this difference. The bottom line that you are seeing on this slide indicates that the board projects an in-year surplus of approximately $2.35 million. However, this is the traditional accounting view, and is before the ministry-required adjustments to both revenue and expenses for compliance. So you get the traditional financial statement picture, and then you start using the special rules for compliance that the ministry has. Special education, as is our normal practice, and particularly since the significant reductions in special education funding began, we provided a view specifically of the special education budget, albeit at a high level. There is a more detailed view within the budget booklet. The primary contributors to the increase in special education revenue include new multidisciplinary teams funding, salary and benefits benchmark amount increases, new mental health workers funding, reduction in special education equipment amounts, expenses, driving a reduction in related revenue. The primary contributors to the increase in special education expenses include increased teacher and educational assistant staffing, increased teacher and educational assistant absence replacement costs, additional support staff, including professional, paraprofessional, program and admin support staff, reduction in special education equipment amounts, expenditures, as noted previously, offset by a reduction in related revenue. Capital, slide 9. What you're seeing here is what the budget is projecting as being spent in 2018-19. I know that Superintendent Hobbs is going to be presenting probably much more detail the allocations for these various lines. But based on what we have, there's around $44.8 million that will be spent. And as the recommendation noted, that could change if more money came in, if more funding came forward. We will now move for a moment away from a focus on operating and review the planned capital investments. Please note that the values reflected only relate to 18-19 activity and do not represent the total value of the various projects or initiatives. First 4 items, and as you can see, they're the various schools that are going to be built. And then they talk about school condition improvement, and then the school renewal plan, and child care capital, and then greenhouse gas reduction. And you can see the numbers on the report. Slide 10, ministry compliance. As is our focus, as opposed to the PSAB or accounting view, we see here the proposed 2018-19 budget, if approved, would result in an in-year operating deficit for compliance purposes of just over a deficit of just over 1.8 million. This number differs from the accounting surplus of approximately 2.4 million, which we saw on an earlier slide. The reason for the difference is due to the ministry requirements to adjust revenue and expense lines for items that the ministry excludes from the compliance calculation, a prime and one of the major examples being the retirement gratuities. After adjustments, though, the board's budget remains ministry compliant. As well, the board is compliant with the ministry and governance envelope, where they set the funding amount and say that we can't spend over. Slide 11, detail of accumulated surplus deficit. The next 2 slides display the projected impact of the proposed budget if it were to be approved on our accumulated surplus. The board's accumulated surplus is divided into 2 sections. A portion is available for compliance, the slide you see in front of you, and the balance, which is unavailable for compliance, it has been deemed to be externally appropriated for the compliance calculation purposes by the Ministry of Education. I would draw to your attention to the bottom of this slide, where you see the projected total accumulated surplus deficit available for compliance in the amount of 8.5 million. It's to the right, on the bottom. After factoring in the in-year deficit amount available for compliance of 1.8 million deficit that you have seen previously in this presentation. Slide 12, detail of accumulated surplus deficit. On the bottom line of the chart, trustees will see projected is an in-year surplus of 2.3 million, which of course is before compliance adjustments, resulting in a positive board balance position of 11.5 million. And that takes you through the PowerPoint and covers a broad area. Sorry for speaking so quickly, but there's a fair amount of information there, and I know you go through it every year. But Chair, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And trustees, I would remind you that there's a second PowerPoint that is more detailed that you may want to reference as well. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions. We have a motion on the floor, so we'll open up for discussion. Trustee Cram?
Thank you, Chair. Slide 10, this is the compliance one.
Yes.
When it says since A is less than both B and C, what happens if A becomes higher than B? Or is it a combined total of B and C?
I'll let Carol answer it. She loves compliance.
Just get back to me.
But she's just poised here to jump on her.
So through you, Chair. In order for the board to be in a compliant state for its budget, line A must be lower than our compliance threshold, which is 1% of our annual operating allocation, and it must be lower than our prior year accumulated surplus available for compliance. If it is not, the board would revisit the budget and attempt to find areas for savings.
Chair, which would lead to my second question. In the last 2 years, we've had a surplus, and we've spent that surplus pretty close to spending it at the end. This is only a 1.5 million difference between A and B. What are our chances of it coming up that high?
I'll start with the director, and then we'll go to the back.
Mr. Chair, through you, in that kind of scenario, the staff would have to adjust its expectations in terms of how it would roll out programs and services in the school board. An example of that is the members of the board would be familiar for the 15-16 year, when in June 15, the board passed a budget very close to what's been presented tonight. And as a result, two steps had to take place. One is a very tight application of what we think is opportunity based on what we could afford. And secondly, of course, is and members of the board may recall, there was a repayment plan or a restructuring plan for repaying the deficit down and coming to, over a period of years, back to a balanced budget. And then subsequent to that, the staff was able to address those obligations quickly, and that led the board to be able to go to more of a surplus budget rather than a balanced budget strategy.
Last comment, Chair. Thank you for that, Director, because that relays some of my concerns that senior, and I knew that all along, senior admin is looking at that and knows it's an issue for us.
Thank you. Trustee Armour.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, like Trustee Cram, I'm concerned too when I see a negative number here or a deficit. So I'm not prepared to support this without some sort of plan on how we're going to get back to a balanced budget.
Thank you. Trustee McAllister.
I have a question with regard to the deficit as found on page slide 7, which is 2.4 million, and the second deficit on slide 11, I think it is, which is projected at 1.8. Maybe I had those reversed, but
The 2.4 is more a financial statement number, whereas the 1.8 is as a result of specified ministry calculations. They require you to add things and subtract things. I believe there's more information in the booklet that shows you just what they add and they do delete. But
we're back to compliant purposes.
yes, it's almost like having financial statements in your business and then turning to the tax man, and he doesn't care. He cares about your financial statements as a starting point, but then he adds and subtracts to get the number for tax purposes. And here they add and subtract to get the numbers that they regard for funding purposes.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you. Through the chair, back to slide number 7. I think I'm looking at the same figures everyone else is, but my interpretation is that we're projecting a 2.3 million surplus with a reduction of 2.4 million in surplus from the previous year. Tell me I'm reading that wrong. Through the chair.
Yep.
You're looking at 4.8 million last year versus 2.4 million this year for financial statement purposes.
I'm talking, sorry.
On page 7.
Page 7, basing it upon our budget. Are we projecting a $2.3 million surplus?
Yes.
And the 2.4 that's in brackets is simply a reduction of what we projected last year, which was 4.7.
But again, last year they would have taken the 4.7 and added and subtracted to it according to the ministry calculations. And the largest number in that is retirement gratuities. And it would have ended up very close to, around 900,000 did we end up in the end with a budget that the board passed. We did not pass a budget that ended up with 4.8 million last year.
I can tell Trustee McPherson you need some more clarity on that.
I've just moved up to slide number 12, and we're still projecting a $2.3 million surplus according to line 5. Maybe
We're going to 12 now?
What were they last year?
my question, I guess, is have we a surplus budget or have we a deficit budget? Putting the ministry compliance aside. Deal with that after the overall budget.
Okay. So I'm going to let you folks answer that.
It's not easy to put the ministry compliance aside because in the end, that's what the ministry evaluates you by. Just like the taxman evaluates you by your taxable income, not the net income on your financial statement. I don't have last year's report to show you how that worked, but we do not. You're playing with two different concepts. We're playing with two different concepts here. One is a number according if you had financial statements, which you would end up with. The other is the number the ministry considers important for determining whether we're in compliance or not. And whether we're in compliance or not determines whether the ministry steps in and asks us to implement a financial plan. And what we're saying is we're in compliance, but we are 1.8 million in deficit as far as the ministry is concerned. So,
Trustee McAllister?
You mentioned at the outset that there were 3 pressure points,
yes.
right, on slide 1, I believe it was. Or if we, special education, student transportation, and staff absent, replacement costs, if we were to address the 1.8 deficit for compliant purposes, would these be the areas in which we would have to search?
They are the areas that are increasing and really right across the province. This is not unique to Upper Canada. This is systemic across the province. Staff absence replacement costs, they've been looking at that, but the only response to date has been that boards keep increasing their provision for replacement workers to deal with the increased absences. I don't know personally if there's a simple solution to that problem. Student transportation expenses is something that is going up across the province as well. Again, we have the effect of the Employment Standards Act coming in, and some of the drivers are below the minimum wage, and they're being pushed up, and the people that were above them are now coming forward and saying, well, what about us? We were paid above what that fellow was paid, and now he's being paid the same as us. So there's a ripple effect happening as well. Special education, seeing the demand. Superintendent Allen could speak to it more than myself, but there is a demand out there, and again, people are responding to it, and primarily, I think, just by increasing resources.
Director?
Mr. Chair, through you, I just want to echo what the superintendent just raised there, which is that particular slide speaks to three particular areas that the province has engaged in the last 5 years, and in each instance they've had local consequences. So I just want to focus, for instance, on the special education one. It's no news to this board that when the high needs amount was adjusted to now measures of variability, the local school board and all school boards, not all, many school boards across the province, noted a significant gap in funding that was imposed over a 3-year of stepping down those funding differences, and now we see that as an annual occurrence when we discuss special education program and services funding that we receive from the province. Just to land on the staff absences replacement costs, for example, provincially this is an item that's been identified by the provincial auditor. It's been recognized that there has been a trending across Ontario in all school boards since 2014 that this particular budget line has changed in terms of the expenses, and that it remains a focus that the board and the province are continuing to try to monitor and adjust, because without having those interventions, without having that attention, it would be a greater liability than it would be to the board, and I would imagine to the province.
Thank you. Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. It may not be a fair question, but if you could try to answer it in the director in general terms as opposed to specifics. And in light of Trustee McAllister's recent comment, can you give me any hypothetical examples of where senior admin may look at if that compliance becomes in danger?
Sure. Mr. Chair, through you. As we did in 2015-2016, the board may recall that its threshold of comfort was 0.5%, because the board at the time felt that anything that edged towards the full 1% compliance ceiling was too tight, and conveyed the message that we didn't have any flexibility for any unknown expenses. And in the budget being presented, the board remains having that type of flexibility at this time. Hypothetically, it's a hard one, Mr. Chair, to reference, because much of our costs are committed at the front end of the operational year, and I would use the example of staffing for that. So we would need to look at areas that didn't have the same constraints throughout the entire budget year if in fact we were confronted with costs that were unforeseen, and that would need to bring the board up to speed about where those costs are projected that were not foreseen and how we think that we would be able to address them during in-year. But, I would just refer to my finance colleagues that I believe is at 83% of our budget is fixed costs around labor. And because of that, that means the board has even less flexibility to deal with other resources that could be rolled back, reduced, or reapplied in a different way during the budget year.
Okay. Trustee Armour.
Just to follow up on the budget. So we have an obligation to make sure that the monies is spent responsibly, and I have a really hard time supporting a budget that's in a deficit position, and knowing that 83% of our costs are fixed, it's even more important that we're able to balance at 1.8 million. So what was our contingency, maybe can somebody answer this, that we had over the last few years? We built in a surplus, and that's how we balanced the budget or passed the budget before. Somebody remember those amounts?
I don't have them off the top of my head, Director.
Mr. Chair, through you, I believe it was 800K was the amount that we were using at that time.
Okay. So I would like to see a balanced budget with some sort of surplus built into it. It worries me when we're going into a new year, especially with possibly a new board, that we're passing a budget that's in a deficit. We've done that before as a team, and I worry about that. So I don't think that's fair for the incoming trustees to have to deal with.
Trustee McAllister, thank you.
My worry is a different one. My worry is that if we continue to shave to get the 1.8 million that would reduce that deficit for compliant purposes, then we are going to be looking at student programs and school programs. It's not as if we are a fat organization, because we're not. And so I'm not sure. We can go back and look, but I'm not sure we're going to find a lot.
Thank you. Trustee Bowman-Pearson.
I guess 2 points. I'm assuming that there is no built-in emerging needs line in this budget. In the past, in fact, through our experience of 2014-15, it was at that point where we started demanding that within our budget. That largely was based upon being over-optimistic about enrollment. Now, the question about the compliant deficit, does the ministry have the expectation that that somehow will be addressed within the next fiscal year? In other words, as we go along and our numbers become firmer, is the anticipation that that will be reduced by the end of our fiscal year? Or is there a requirement for us to accommodate that in the 2019-20 budget? Just a clarification. I realize that we're probably about 1.4 million under the threshold, but I'm not sure I want a further deficit to be our cushion, if you'd realize what I mean. In other words, are we taking a calculated guess that there will be little to no change in our projections?
We'll start with the director on that one.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, through you, I'll begin and I'll ask Superintendent Dawes just to wade in, because it's quite correct that our funding is enrollment driven, and the board knows that quite well. So if we look at our enrollment projections over the past 3 years, trustees will know that our projections were very, very close, and the variance would not lead us to compound the deficit that's presented here this evening. As a matter of fact, if we think about the 17-18 year, trustees will recall that there was some genuine concern about what would be the aftershock post-accommodation review. And many families had advised us during that process that they were considering other options for providing their children with an education experience, and may not include the Upper Canada School Board. In that case, not only did our projections prevail, but we actually had an increase in enrollment that also was helpful during the school year. I'm just going to ask Superintendent Dawes if he could just speak to that enrollment projection practice, because my recollection is that we've been very, very close, and that the risk or liability inherent of having over-projected and under-delivered has not materialized to date. So, Superintendent Dawes.
Yeah, thank you, Director. Through you, Chair. Trustees may recall in the presentation we provided for the revised estimates back in January, we gave a census differentiation between projected and actual system enrollments. I'd be happy to refresh that information for you. In 2014-15, for example, our system elementary projections came in 4 students lower than projected. In 2015-16, our actuals came in 60 students elementary lower than projected. In 2016-17, we were 169 students higher than originally projected. And in 2017-18, as the Director has suggested, 293 students higher than originally projected. On the secondary side, going back several years, 2014-15, 6 students higher than originally projected. The year after that, 2015-16, 40 students lower than originally projected. 2016-17, 29 students higher. This current year, 2017-18, when we did that presentation, at that time we were projecting 4 students higher than originally projected for secondary panel.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Cartner.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make a comment that I think we all feel that perhaps we want a balanced budget, but if it's going to be at the loss of program, if it's going to be attacking our vision that we want children to succeed in our schools, at a cost to that, no matter what aspect we attack, it's going to affect the students. So I understand the concept of having a balanced budget. We are compliant with the ministry, as we're being told by our finance people. Seeing those minus numbers don't scare me quite as much when we're compliant. We can only hope and pray that we will have increased enrollment, so our budgets will increase whenever we find the kids in the seats in September. So I just wanted to reiterate that I don't want to see programs affected as a trustee for this board. We have an expectation that we have to follow through. We've been providing what we need to provide for spec ed students. That happened last year whenever we took money out of the program department for spec ed, and then we had to put it back in again. So we got our increase. We had a plus sign in front of our budget, but it was easily eaten up by the special needs kids, and so be it. So that's just my feelings on the whole issue.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Okay, we have a motion on the table. Motion is moved by Trustee Bill McPherson and seconded by Trustee Carol Cartner, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the 2018-19 annual projected operating expenses in the amount of $370,420,818 and a capital disbursement of $44,753,157, plus all additional amounts of subsequently allotted or allocated by the ministry. I'll ask you to cast your votes, please. Trustee Swan?
I voted, but it's yay.
I've got it, thank you very much, and the motion carries. So the budget has passed. I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone that's been involved in this. We know that this is a much different time than last year. We know the challenges are there. And I also want to thank the senior team for the hard work that I know that you and the director have been involved in. I know that this has not been an easy process. I'm along with a lot of the trustees. We've got our fingers crossed that our enrollments increase and help us out with this deficit. It's never easy to do that, but at the same time, as Trustee Karkner said, we value the programming for our kids, and the last thing we want to do is have any impact on that. So I thank everyone for that. Again, thank you very much, Michael, Carol. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on to the next is the Communication and Relation Management Plan update. I'm going to turn this over to our Superintendent Phil Dawes, and I believe Andrea is coming forward.
Thank you, Chair. Pleased to have this opportunity to present this update with respect to the Communications and Relationship Management, or what we commonly refer to as the CRM, Department Work Plan. And the update is intended to inform the Board of the progress achieved this year with a view to our plans for next year as well. And as the Chair indicated, pleased to have with me this evening our Manager of Communications, Andrea Walasek. Thank you, Andrea. So the magnitude of the board's mission really becomes all the more evident when we consider the vast geography of the Upper Canada District School Board, all 12,000 square kilometers, serving more than 80 schools across many unique rural and urban communities, and rapid changes happening to communications technology that are being used by students and our communities and our staff. And so we really are continuing to ask ourselves, in light of these complexities, how effective communication can support our mission. We prepare all students for a successful life. And we are advantaged in our board to have a very comprehensive strategic plan. And the Communications Department has a mission as well, which is strategic and innovative communications for all. So together, this really is an opportunity to build capacity in leaders across our large system. And a strong communications support is more than just information push. This really is about helping everyone involved to make a connection to a larger cause, to feel a sense of inclusion, and to really use that big idea of relationship management as a strategy as a part of our CRM plan. Trustees are likely aware that we do have a UCDSB Communications Policy 300, which specifies the importance of open two-way communication to provide accurate and timely information between staff, school communities, and the media. And associated with that policy is UCDSB Communications Procedure 300.1, which indicates that the director or designate will conduct an annual review of the Communications and Public Relations Plan by surveying stakeholder groups, and will provide a summary report to the board on the effectiveness of communications. So that's what tonight is really all about. So by way of an overview of the presentation you're going to receive, it's really divided into three sections. As I suggested earlier, tonight is partially about providing you an indication of our success from this past year. It has been a monumental year in the Communications Department, and we're happy to have the opportunity to share some of those successes with you. Following that, I want to give you an indication of the feedback process that we've been working through this year and the information we've received that is driving our updated plan. And then the final part of the presentation is to the updated plan itself. Trustees may recall it was a little more than a year ago that trustees received an update on the communications plan for 2016-17. And at that time, we were in a bit of a different place than we are now. We were at that time really trying to make sense of the complexity of all of the information that we were dealing with and the request for communication support. And at that time, we introduced the plan that we put into place for this year. And trustees may recall that it fell into what we called 4 pillars of support. So we've been following this plan this year. And the first pillar, targeted school support, is really about what it means to be a good communication school. The second pillar has been about how we can help our big district to feel smaller so that everybody can make a connection with the UCDSB as a whole. The third pillar relates to how we can help, through the communications department, capture the enthusiasm of our parents and communities to connect with the UCDSB through an effective marketing and advertising strategies. And the fourth one relates to the support that we can provide to numerous committees, events across our board. All are doing fantastic work, but we really wanted to make sure that we were focusing our efforts as effectively as possible across those committees and events. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Andrea so that she can give you a more precise view of the work that we've been doing this past year.
Thanks, Phil. So we'll start off with the targeted school support, which you can see on your screen. There's actually one of our Snapchat filters from the past year from one of the equity and inclusion events. So you can see the We All Belong filter, and you can see quite a few people enjoying themselves in that Snapchat filter. Beyond that, we cover graduations. We've been doing transitions for the recent PAR school transitions. We've been doing a fantastic thing with video tours of schools, but we'll get to that sooner. We've been doing the regular social media like Twitter, live streaming, Facebook, those types of things, and we've been doing an increased focus on Instagram as well. So one of the video series we've been doing over the past year is these What's Happening in Upper Canada videos, and Mark on my team has done a great job of those, and we actually have a quick 20-second clip of one of those, if you don't mind playing it, Lisa.
My name is Ben, a student at Pakenham Public School, and here's what's happening in the Almont family of schools. Here's Melissa to tell us about the Almont and District High School CrossFit program.
My name is Melissa. I'm in grade 11 at Almont and District High School, and we're here to talk about the CrossFit program. Through the CrossFit program, we weight train, we circuit train, we body weight train, and we learn about nutrition.
Quick clip that we've been focusing on individual programs that are unique to certain schools, trying to showcase the heart of that school through those, and we've been focusing on those through families of schools. And coming up next here we have video tours of schools. We've done a new thing with these video tours of schools this year where we try to focus on the heart of the school. So no longer are we doing a tour that just shows the bricks and mortar anymore. We're actually showing the students interacting with their school on a daily basis. So we actually have a clip of Duncan Jay's video. This one, to give you some perspective, go ahead.
Welcome to Duncan Jay School! Dare to care. Dare to dream. Dare to soar.
What I love about Duncan Jay is that there's a lot of nice teachers and a lot of nice kids.
Because I love playing at school, I love my teachers, and I like gym because it's my favorite school in the whole world, and I love my teacher very much.
Go for that kid.
Yeah. So that video was actually brought forward at one of the open houses at Duncan Jay Schooler this year, and that was for the Wolford students specifically. So they used that event to bring it forward, and since then they've had 6,500 views, which is pretty amazing for a town of 9,000 people. Moving on to board-wide school support. So this is where we support communications on a multi-school level, such as TRC +3. We were recently out there for the 4 days, doing different things such as Orange Shirt Day, Dress Purple Day, the Pink Days, those types of things. Very recently was Education Week, which happened to also be TRC +3 and Canadian Mental Health Week. So we were very busy that week. But we do try to take these events to showcase the great things that the board is doing right across our communities and in as many schools as possible at once. One of the board-wide things we did was we worked with the IT department on the website redesign project. And the sites are designed to be more streamlined, user-friendly, with modern look and feel. A little bit easier to use, for sure. When we look at our Twitter, which has about 6,300 followers, our tweets generally earn about 2,400 or so impressions within 24 hours, and you can see we can actually break it down by time of day. And then over a 28-day period, we usually earned about 3,200 impressions per day, which is not too bad. And then on Facebook, we have about 10,848 followers. With that, we reach about 58,000 people in about a month's time. Our videos reach 11,000 people. And then our posts are engaged with, which means people are liking, commenting, sharing, those types of things, about 19,000. On to advertising and marketing, which is our third pillar. You've probably seen a lot of this lately with the registration campaign, and that one I'll get into in a minute. But we've also been doing other advertising, including video tours like you just saw, summer safety, school bus safety, community events, and then those important days of the year such as Remembrance Day. So this is our kindergarten advertising poster. In 2016-17, we started using tracking to target a bit more. And then in this year, in 2017-18, we've furthered that targeted campaign even more closely, and we've been really making sure that our ads are where parents are, as opposed to expecting parents to come and find our ads. We've also separated out the intermediate and secondary transitions from our registration campaign because we recognize that secondary students probably aren't getting attracted to one of our secondary schools by seeing pictures of happy kindergartners playing in their classroom. As much as we'd all love to go back to kindergarten and play every day, unfortunately we can't. So we have been focusing on our students in secondary schools and preparing for secondary schools by realizing that they communicate in a different way than we certainly have in the past. So we've been, as I mentioned before, we've been doing increased focus on Instagram. We've started dabbling into Snapchat by introducing filters like you saw earlier. And those filters have been very, very successful. A couple of weeks ago during Education Week, we had a filter at CCDS, and 305 people looked at that filter. 173 people decided to use that, and out of those 173 uses, it was viewed over 6,000 times. At the recent OFSA basketball tournament, we had 439 people snap using our filter, and that was viewed about 19,000 times, and that would have been right across the province because of the people who were participating. And committees, events, and district support. This is where you see us on a number of committees throughout the board, including Champions for Kids, Living Well, the retirement event, all of our awards and recognitions. We try to play as much of a role as we are useful in anyways. And we provide support at things like board meetings such as this, where I have my friend April back here tweeting in the background. This is something we actually heard feedback from a lot of our administration right across the board, where they were saying they didn't want to see as many ads on their Facebooks of their schools. And we heard that loud and clear. So what we did was we combined our advertising for our awards and recognitions programs into one ad, so that we don't have 4 ads going out every 2 weeks on a school's Facebook wall, driving down the posts that they want to share with their parents, like pictures of students.
So with that overview of what we've been doing this year, I wanted to take an opportunity just to walk trustees through the feedback process that we've been actively engaging this winter and spring. It has been busy. Andrea and I have been out to a number of consultation sessions, and this has been with the support of the senior team. Between February and April, we've met with Operations Council, Executive Council, Special Education Advisory Committee, Parent Involvement Committee, and Student Senate. Included with that, I would like to note, we do tend to receive information and feedback on a regular basis just through our regular work with students, with school staff. And so that's kind of built into what we're talking about here as well. When we did the structured feedback sessions, Andrea and I wanted to have it roll out in a consistent manner. So we tended to ask the groups that we were working with these 3 specific questions. I won't read them to you now. They're there for you to see. I think the main point on this one is that we found, as we went into this process, although we had these structured questions, really it was just a free flow of information. And people felt comfortable enough to just share with us anything that was on their mind as it related to communications practices and just general understanding about the work that we do and how we could make it even better. So we really appreciated the feedback that we got, and we've been happy to have an opportunity this year to talk about it in more detail about how we can align it for next year. If I was to try and itemize everything that we got back, it wouldn't be able to fit on this slide, so we felt the urge to break it down into a number of key themes, and that's what you're looking at on this slide. We heard, for example, through the feedback sessions that we should continue we should take the opportunity to present this to a student senate. So I am pleased to inform the board that Andrea and I did go to a session last month at Student Senate, and it was a wonderful opportunity. We had to get feedback from the senators, and I think we had about a half an hour slotted time that extended maybe a little bit longer than that, and really we could have stayed longer, and we'll look forward to doing that again next year, certainly. We also heard that, generally speaking, folks would like us to see a little bit more of a focus on academics in our communications as opposed to athletics. We heard from folks we're seeing a lot of the sports in schools. We'd like to see a little bit of a balance with academics as well. So we have started that with a number of videos that are more academics related from a theme perspective. And again, that will be a focus next year as well. We did hear perhaps an opportunity next year to further outreach with Akwesasne through the AMBI, and we'll look forward to building that relationship more deeply next year as well. General enthusiasm for the targeted marketing that we're doing. Andrea mentioned that earlier. We made a focused effort through the communications team, and my kudos to them, for getting out to the community fairs, helping with the booths. We've had an effort this year to have UCDSB banners placed in hockey arenas across our region, and that's been very enthusiastically thumbs up as well. So we're hearing keep that up, and we intend to do so. Would like to hear more about our international students. I was very encouraged to hear that, and we've already begun to work with Superintendent Mills and Matt Raby to understand how we can assist the marketing and advertising and communications work that they're doing in international ed, and very important for us to provide the opportunities for our students and staff to see the international profiles across our board. And finally, and not surprising perhaps, continued theme around support for anxiety and wellness. And that already is a focus for our communications department through communications work that we do and committee support, but we were very appreciative to hear that, and it will continue to be a focus into next year as well. So what does all this mean as it relates to the updated plan? Well, again, this has been an opportunity to reflect on the feedback that we've received and think about what next year looks like. And the bottom line is we feel that we would like to continue with the progress that we've developed this year. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We would like to stick with the 4 pillars. But I think what there is an opportunity for us to do is maybe get a little bit closer and precise as it relates to the relationship management piece of that. And I think the way to do that, in conversation with Andrea and team, is to focus a little bit more on what we're calling the 5 Ps: places, programs, pupils, parents, and profession. So for example, how do we strengthen the connection between community and UCDSB as a whole when we talk about places? How do we inform and help involve participation in the many and varied wonderful programs that we offer across our board? How do we ensure that students stay at the forefront of everything that we do through our communications work? How do we ensure that our parents are knowledgeable and feel included in the learning that's happening in our schools and in our classrooms? And how do we support the communications needs of staff from a professional point of view? So again, we'll be working next year to more deeply understand how our work aligns with the 5 Ps as they align with the 4 pillars of support. Now, do you want to talk a little bit more about what's next?
Sure.
More detailed perspective?
Sure.
Thanks.
Coming up, the big thing at the end of June is always graduations. So there's about a week or 2 in there where we're just constantly focused on graduations, showing the successes of our students from the previous year, which is always a great time for us. We always look forward to it. There's a number of C4K events coming up. There's a couple of breakfasts coming for C4K. The celebrations night is in the beginning of June. There's going to be some more video tours of schools, and Derek's been working with NDDHS on online course selection videos, which I think will be a great addition to basically a video course catalog, so parents and students can actually see what's offered in those courses if they can't make it to an open house at one of the secondary schools, for example. And then in 2018-19, based on the feedback we received from our tour of promoting our current work plan, we heard from a number of people that they wanted to see us give a little bit more attention to the grade 7 and 9 transitions, which we certainly plan on doing, and we're working on a pilot program where we hope to work with approximately 3 secondary schools to see what's working, what could use a little bit of improvement, and see if we can develop any new ideas out of it. Profiles in Excellence. This is an idea we received out of Russell High School. They do some great little videos of students when they come home on their summer break or their spring break, where they catch up with the student and they say, so how did the UCDSB prepare you for a successful life? And we thought that was a great example, and we'd love to bring that board-wide for next year. We want to certainly continue to increase encouragement and support for schools that are attending fairs, parades, and community events. We've heard a lot back from schools saying, yes, we are participating in these, but we'd love to have some additional support, so absolutely. And next year we plan on spending equal time on academics, extracurriculars, and community, so that we can ensure that next year when we do our tour, we don't hear that you want to spend more time on academics and less on athletics.
And finally, we wanted to just take an opportunity briefly to make the point about the director's work plan. So of course, with the 4 goals, and I know we'll be receiving a more detailed presentation soon tonight, but really across the 4 goals, there are opportunities for participation and involvement from a communications perspective, and there are also a number of specific action items in the director's work plan, so that will obviously be a focus for communications department as well leading into next year. So with that, Chair, I conclude the presentation and would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Trustee McAllister.
It's just a comment, really. There's nothing in this presentation this evening that I don't like.
Thank you.
Honestly. I would not have said that. Perhaps I would have been less enthusiastic 8 years ago when I was first elected to this board. But, you know, I think we are right in the 21st century. The thing that I really like about it is that it's student, school focused to a large extent. It's community based. It's cross departmental. It covers like a whole bunch of bases. congratulations. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
For you, Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Swan.
I'm just wondering how we're going to tie in, or if somehow in this we're going to tie in staff training, employee training into the use of all this technology like Snapchat and some of the other forums of communication that many people may not be familiar with or comfortable with.
You mean people like ourselves?
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. I guess that's a good question. Do our staff members, are we doing anything in terms of helping them engage in this new technological processes?
Through you, Chair, and maybe Andrea can help me out with this. We have been talking already about some social media assistance for OAs, office administrators, leading into the next school year. We did that last year, and it was very successful. We're hearing more and more that our schools have become familiarized with Twitter and Facebook, so we're starting to think that Instagram would be a better way to go to keep folks up to speed. But I sense from the question, and maybe I'm a bit off, I'm not sure, that we're talking a bit about staff development overall. And I wouldn't want to venture too far into that space because it's a work in progress, and it's certainly aligned with the director's work plan. But I have been in conversation a bit with Superintendent Coombs on this, and it's a work in progress. But we certainly recognize the need, and we're looking forward to providing that support next year and into the years to come.
Thank you. Trustee McPherson and then Trustee Carter.
Following up on Trustee McAllister's comment, the level of engagement is literally mind-boggling. And it goes just beyond my family room. The social media, school bus cancellations, power out of the school, it's all out there. The only negative part that I can see in this is that as a board, we're not required to advertise to recruit students. Remember years ago, our board bought a billboard in Rockville, and the negativity that we got for doing that. But it's sad to think that in order to survive, we have to advertise. But I think you're doing a bang-up job, and I'm like the rest of the dinosaurs. My thumbs are too big for most of this stuff.
Trustee Gardner, thank you.
Perhaps, through you, Chair, perhaps a suggestion on the academic side. I know that we have a lot of our students who are out in the field with co-op placements, and I didn't know whether that's something that you wanted to showcase in some of your videos, that is actually a big part of the secondary school education.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Just want to remind the trustees of the last few board meetings we've had. They would have been over by now. Keep that tucked in the back of your mind because we're not even close. I'm going to turn the next. Saying that, I'm going to pass this over to Superintendent Hobbs, who is going to talk about the capital updates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise I'll make sure I move quickly through my 50 slides.
No, I'm not saying any. I'm just having the trustees recall.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to bring back, I think, the third capital update for this fiscal year, and I believe it will be the final one for this year as we're in full throes of kicking off the construction season. So today it's my pleasure just to bring you a brief update on some of the projects of interest. So for summer 2018, as you know, that's the summertime is when we actually execute the vast majority of our projects. We're anticipating this summer approximately $24 million in capital spend, in the neighborhood of 90 to 100 actual separate capital projects across the organization. Some of note, really what we've heard is that there's lots of things going on behind the scenes, and with boilers and roofs and things that aren't quite as obvious to you, but we actually do quite a bit of work as well on the front end where people really interact and notice the differences at schools. So some of the projects of note, I'll just pick a few here. Pine View, an extensive repaving of selected play areas that we've been working on with that school for a number of years in cooperation with the trustee and the council. Rockland District High School, going to be repaving bus lanes, parking, and paving areas. I'm stealing Peter Bosch's thunder a little bit by speaking about all the paving, but doing an awful lot of paving at a number of schools. Looking at shade structures. South Crosby is an interesting one where the school council is actually working on a shade structure in as a memorial, and we're working with them on helping them build that shade structure as well and getting it done. Looking at Charland, working with the community and the school to recondition the granular track, which is a community partnership initiative that we actually have with municipality there, so that's been ongoing. And Winchester, starting the early phases of a rather major restructuring of traffic flow around the hospital and a redo of daycare pickup drop-off area there. So that will be actually starting some of the preliminary work. We're, as you know, continuing to work on land acquisition in Cornwall and Brockville. I say it's progressing slowly, as expected to some extent, but it progresses in kind of a staccato fashion to the point where there's even developments sort of happening in the last couple of hours. So that's good news. We're just working patiently through that. And also the North Grenville addition space template. So as you may be aware, when we have the opportunity to receive capital funding from the Ministry of Education for an addition or a new school, one of the first steps for us as a precursor even to hiring an architect is to submit a space template that describes all of the areas and how we'll divide up the sort of requisite space that we're building, and that's about complete and almost ready for submission to the ministry for approval. So lots of things going on in physical construction, but also continuing the planning phases. As you know, we've also received money in last year around this time for Roxmore Addition and Daycare, and so I'm just sharing with you some of the early concept drawings that we had the opportunity to share with Superintendent Allen and the North Stormont and Roxmore school communities last Thursday evening. So this is an artist rendering of what the actual new wing will look like for the additional students coming from North Stormont. There's also a separate portion that's a daycare space. The actual design work is substantially complete for that, so we're anticipating that into the fall we'll be tendering and then beginning construction in 2019 for a September 2020 opening. My favorite thing in the world, branding. As you know, we're continuing on with our efforts around branding. So many of you, I think, have noted over the course of the last year that you're starting to see the school names and the Upper Canada District School Board appearing on the walls of our schools. So we're continuing on that. Our commitment was to actually get through substantial completion of all schools within about 3 years, and we're continuing on with that this summer. But we've also turned our focus, if you'll reflect back to one of my scintillating presentations on branding, we also committed to moving forward with street signage. So how do we actually put signs in the ground in front of schools at the street in a way that is consistent and reflecting our branding? So one of the, some of the requirements that we started out with were how do we get a standard look and feel that sort of reflects the kind of tone and the mood that we're looking for as an organization? How do we do something that's consistent with all architectures, because we have schools from very old to very new. We have all kinds of street configurations that we're dealing with and all kinds of site considerations that we're dealing with. We wanted to make sure that the board was clearly identified and the school names clearly identified. And one of the big things that was a requirement for us is what we wanted them to be modular. So in other words, what we wanted to do was to actually have a base level of sign that we could commit to funding out of a central budget for all schools. But some schools will have an aspiration to add on to that. So they might want an LCD display panel, they might want to have their logo. And what we wanted to be able to do was allow schools to sort of mix and match and add components, both at the start when we're putting the sign in initially, but also after the fact. So if they want to come back and raise money and say they want to add a panel, can we actually build this so that we can pop out a module and put a new module in? So we spent quite a bit of time with architects and consultants and a number of school principals. And this is the concept that we've come up with. So just an artist rendering of the sort of concept, and basically the idea is that this kind of concept will allow us to fit that in almost any school location. We can add on LCD panels or other kinds of assets. It actually, the architects bring a lot of interesting experience in terms of how to avoid vandalism or damage to signs associated with vehicles backing into them or wind problems and those kinds of things. So we've been through an extensive focus group, and we're going to, I think, progress with doing about 3 or 4 schools this year as part of the pilot project on that. With regard to our budget outlook, we're looking forward to 2018-19, as Superintendent Backstrom noted. The early anticipated spend for 2018-19 is in the neighborhood of $44 million. But as you'll note from his presentation, that presupposes a number of things happening in the 2018-19 year, notably that we're going to conclude land deals on Cornwall and the Brockville schools, conclude the substantial completion of Roxmore and a number of other projects. So at this time of year, some of those things are more certain than others, but as you know, we'll see you a number of times throughout the school year to actually bring you updates. And you'll recognize this format because I think we've been doing it this way for about 7 or 8 years now. It's just I can't fit any more columns on there to show you the history going back. And that concludes my presentation for this evening.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? Lots of great things happening, and again, I thank you for acknowledging Peter Bosch, because I know Peter is a huge part of this. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item. I'm going to be turning this over to Superintendent Ferguson. There are 3 motions dealing with policy revisions in response to the Minister of Education's policy program memorandums, EPM number 161, supporting children and students with prevalent medical conditions in schools. So, Superintendent Ferguson, I'm going to take one motion at a time and have you address that. Are you fine with that?
Sure.
Okay. So the first motion is that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revisions to its policy 112, student health, as presented May the 23rd, 2018. So I need a mover and a seconder, and then we'll open it up, or I'll pass it over to Superintendent Ferguson. Moved by Trustee Armour, seconded by Trustee Richards. Thank you. Okay, Superintendent Ferguson.
Through your chair. So this is a presentation on responding to the Ministry of Education's policy and program memorandum, BPM 161, supporting children and students with prevalent medical conditions in schools. So PPM 161 came out in issued in February, I believe it says there. Let's see here, I'll just check. Yeah, February 28th. And the Ministry of Education expects that all school boards in Ontario develop and maintain a policy or policies to support students in schools who have asthma, diabetes, epilepsy, or at risk for anaphylaxis. So the board policies must be implemented no later than September 1st, 2018. So our current state, currently the board has the following documents related to the requirements in PPM 161. We do have a student health policy, policy 112, and we have procedures that go with that. We also have asthma policy and procedure 4003, and we have anaphylaxis policy 113 and protocol to go with that, and we also have a diabetes protocol that's in draft form. So to be compliant with PPM 161, staff are recommending that the board pass a policy, student health supporting students with medical needs, that will apply to the accommodation of all medical needs, including complex medical needs. This new policy is intended to supersede the Student Health Policy 112 and replace the Asthma Policy 4003 and Life-Threatening Allergies Policy 113. The language in the new policy is consistent with the Student Health Policy, as well as recognizing the components required to be in compliance with PPM 161, Sabrina's Law, and Ryan's Law. And again, so Sabrina's Law deals with anaphylaxis and Ryan's Law deals with asthma.
Okay.
So, do you want me to pause there?
Yeah, we will pause there. Are there any comments or questions on this particular part of the, this is the only motion that's on the table? Comments or questions? Okay, seeing there are none, I have a motion moved by Trustee Armour, seconded by Trustee Richards, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve the recommended revisions to its Policy 112 Student Health as presented May the 23rd, 2018. I ask you to cast your votes for that particular motion, please.
I have an error here, but I am in support.
Thank you.
I also had an error, and I'm in support.
Okay, can I just get a show of hands and we'll refresh our screens as we're, thank you very much, that carries. While we're refreshing our screens and doing that, the next motion is that the Upper Canada District School Board rescind and retires policy 113, life-threatening allergies and anaphylactic, yes, from its policy register effective May the 23rd, 2018. I need a mover. Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee Armour. And I'll turn again back over to Superintendent Ferguson.
Okay, thank you, through you, Chair. So, should the board revise its policy 112, then staff will proceed to implement a student health procedure which broadly identifies the responsibilities required of school board pursuant to PPM 161. The procedure is intended to replace the ASHA procedure 403.1 and also create the framework for addressing complex medical needs, anaphylaxis, diabetes, and epilepsy. Staff will be utilizing our new diabetes and epilepsy protocols with some amendments as templates for protocols for each of the 4 prevalent medical conditions. The board's life-threatening emergency medical forms for school and transportation will be amended to include diabetes and epilepsy on page 1. Staff will create 4 separate emergency protocol sheets, 1 for each prevalent condition, and we will be amending the student registration form to include asthma, diabetes, and epilepsy as specific medical conditions to be identified along with anaphylaxis.
Thank you. Comments or questions on that? And there are none. I have a motion moved by Trustee Bill McPherson, seconded by Trustee Jeremy Armour, that the Upper Canada District School Board rescind and retire policy 113 from its policy register effective May the 23rd, 2018. I ask you to cast your votes, please.
I'm in favor. It's not coming.
Again, show of hands.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, I've got it now, sorry. And that should carry. That carries. Trustee McAllister, you're still getting there?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. That carries. And the last motion is that the Upper Canada District School Board rescind and retire policy 4003, asthma, from its policy register effective May the 23rd, 2018. And mover, Trustee Karkner, seconded by Trustee Richards. And I'll turn it back over to Superintendent Ferguson.
Well, through you, Chair, for that one, I think what I've presented so far is provide you enough information, and then I can share with, if the Chair would like me to, I can share a little bit more about PPM 161.
So that's all ready to go. Any comments or questions? Okay, I ask you to cast your votes on that, please. And that carries. Thank you very much, Superintendent Ferguson. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item,
No,
which...
he's not finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You have to finish talking about PPM 160.
Plan of care.
My policy. Is there another one?
Plan of care.
Just to finish off.
I'll finish that off. Sorry. My apology.
Apology accepted. Through you, Chair. So,
Okay.
I just wanted to make trustees aware that the Ministry of Education's PPM 161 also requires a further operational adjustment by staff to forms currently in use, including that schools establish plans of care for any students with medical condition. Plans of care include daily or routine management requirements, storage and disposal of supplies, emergency medical responses, storage and disposal of supplies, strategies for emergency preparedness, parental consent for disclosure of personal health information, and parental confirmation of participation in development of the plan of care. And I've just included an example. This is the anaphylaxis one, and they're all very similar. We use the similar template, so there'll be some consistency, and it shows you they're quite involved and will provide schools and parents and students with all the information they need to ensure that our students are safe in our schools.
Thank you. So this is more procedure. Excellent. Thank you. Any comments or questions about that? Trustee McPherson?
I realize that procedure is not our realm, but I'm assuming that there's, well, actually, There's quite a list of procedures here. So you have a plan of action, so to speak, for every emerging possibility as to what's expected of staff if such and such occurs.
Through you, Chair. Yes, in the documents included, we went ahead and included the procedures, the draft procedures that we have, and you'll notice that those documents range from 16 to 21 pages, outlining steps that are to be taken to ensure students are safe, and they include all of the 4 main prevalent medical conditions, and they are attached for your review.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thanks again. Okay, we're moving on to a request to amend the board bylaws. This is, I believe, the third time we've come to the table on this one, so we've had lengthy discussions. I think we're very clear on where everyone stands. However, that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Cram. Trustee Cram, I have 2 motions before me. I would like to split them and have just take one motion at a time. So the first motion that I'm going to put on the table is that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the board bylaw 1.50 with the deletion of the second vice chair, mutandis, effective December the 1st, 2018. Do I have a mover?
Myself.
Trustee Cram and Trustee Richards. And I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. The committee has come to the board, as you mentioned, 2 times before, once on October 11th and once on January 14th, with a revised bylaws, including all of our bylaws. And it was referred back twice, and I think it's because it was complicated with all of the changes that we were having. Then at the meeting on January 14th, it was referred to the meeting in May. So the committee has met. We've got several areas we would like to go to, but breaking them down, we think these are the 2 motions that are probably the most relevant to everybody immediately. So we thought we would bring it forward to you in this format. Just as a little bit of background with our research that I did present on January 14th, there is no other board in the province with a second vice. We are the only board that has one. So with the assurance of some people on Management Council, we believe that the business of the board could still be conducted without a second vice there. And the mutandis, if anybody just is unaware of it, means in every other instance that it's mentioned in our bylaws.
I think I was going to ask that. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions at this point. Trustee Armour?
Changing something for the sake of changing something because the other boards don't have it? I'm not sold on it. I really not. So why are we changing it? What's the reason? What did the committee come to?
Well, if we go back to the original intent, I think, of what the second vice was there, and I was talking to several of the trustees, there was two particular ways it came in. One, when the original board was amalgamated, one of the thoughts was that it would be an east vice and a west vice, which was where the 2 was. Obviously, we don't need that anymore because we've amalgamated into one cohesive unit. So we do not see the need for a second vice.
And I think because we have a couple of trustees that were here, if you want to add any more to that, to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. A bit of a history lesson from us old guys. We originally had one vice chair, probably for the first 6 years of my tenure on the board when it was a 3-year term. The board, to put it mildly, was just a little bit divided. You could fire a cannon down the middle of the boardroom and you wouldn't hit anybody in the middle. The development of the second vice chair's position was almost an appeasement to bring a bit of tranquility to the board. And like anything else with good intentions, it never worked out the way that we really anticipated. The original intention was, as Trustee Cram said, was to have one from the east and one from the west. It didn't always work that way. And as such, it was the board is pulled together. We are but a single board now. And I really think personally that the position has become redundant. Again, referring to every other school board in Ontario, why are we the one who has 2 vice chairs? Do we have a constructive role for the second vice chair? If we can justify the existence, fine. Because really it's not a financial burden. We simply split the allocation differently. But I personally will support eliminating, simply going back to what is more common in Ontario, and that's the first 1 vice chair.
Thank you.
So in what's come to the table is that it's not needed anymore? Just to be clear.
Okay.
That's all.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to ask you to cast your votes, please. Let me just read it again. It's moved by Trustee Cram, seconded by Trustee Richards, that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the Board Bylaw 1.50 with the deletion of the second Vice Chair, Mutandis, effective December the 1st, 2018. Cast your votes, please.
I got an error again, and I'm in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Swan. I have some in here, but not all of them. Trustee Cram, I don't have you, but
Vote.
It's got it now. Trustee Jacobs, I don't have yet. Trustee McAllister, you're
Yes.
still. Thank you. And that carries. Thank you very much. The second motion is that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the board bylaw 4.15 with the addition of number 7, elections of the Ontario Public School Board Association OPSPA representative, and number 8, election of the Ontario Public School Board Association OPSPA alternate representative effective December the 1st, 2018. So I need a mover, Trustees Cram and Trustee Richards. And again, I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Cram.
Thank you, Chair. The position of representative to the OPSPA School Board is a representative of the Board of the Trustees of the Board. Currently, we appoint the OPSPA rep, and it's our belief as a committee that because this person represents the Board of Trustees, that person should be elected in the position by the trustees to have that particular position, and the same rationale would occur for the OPSPA alternate.
Okay, so the discussion really is around electing this position as opposed to it being appointed by the director or by the chair and the committee. Open out to comments and questions. Trustee Bill McPherson.
I think you need a point of clarification in your motion in that you're electing an alternate as well as a sitting member. I believe the nature of OPSPA is only one of those members will be allowed participation in a vote. The second question is, normally this is a 4-year term as it's currently an appointment. Is the expectation that this will occur whenever there is a board election, so to speak, or a selection of our executive? Through the chair, questions to the presenter.
Trustee Cram.
Be for the term of the board.
What?
Be for the term of the board.
So we need to amend this motion.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll have some more we'll come back to the. I'm going to ask you to amend it.
It has to be amended by somebody else.
Yeah. Okay. So who's going to? I need someone. Trustee.
I'll make the amendment.
Yeah, I'm here. Trustee Kirkner, you want to amend this? So how are we going to do this? The second, we want the alternate to be
recommendation to add the election of the director and alternate director of Ontario Public School Boards Association represented effective December 1st, 2018 for the duration or the term of the board.
You have that?
Just add for the term of the board to both of the 7 and 8.
Pardon?
Just add for the term of the board to both 7 and 8. What you want to do like that?
It's all one motion, so it'll cover.
I'm just questioning putting in the year. Should we just say for the four-year term instead of, it's effective now, or 4-year term, or whatever. I can't remember. I can't think of the words that I want to put there.
Well, if it's effective December the 1st, 2018, that means from that board on. It's the new board.
Yeah, it's a new board.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're getting this motion, everyone understands what we're doing with it. Are there any comments? Or Trustee Bill McPherson?
Thank you. Through the chair. I have a slight problem with one of the elected, technically executive positions being a 4-year term. Why can it not be done on an annual basis? Does OPSPO require that amount of continuation? I can understand an appointment for 4 years, much the same as SEAC is appointed for 4 years. But if we're going to do an election, it should stand at the same term length as the rest of the positions. Because once we start electing it, technically this becomes an executive position. An appointment is one thing. An election is another. So I question the justification of a 4-year term.
I'm going to turn it over to Trustee McAllister, who has experience with OSPA, and maybe go deeper into that.
Well, as you know, I'm the alternate presently, along with David McDonald, who is the voting delegate. All I can say is that the business of OPSPA is complicated, and it does take quite a bit of time to learn the ropes, so to speak. Because I think OPSPA, I know OPSPA is important. It really is our union, the union for all school boards, and as such has an awful lot of input to legislation and whatnot. So, having said that, first of all, my question would be to Trustee Cram, if it were to accommodate Trustee McPherson's concern, if the vote were to be held on an annual basis at the inaugural meeting, as we now have it every year, would that be contrary to the intent of the motion?
No, it wouldn't be contrary to the intent of the motion. Was just our thoughts, some along your lines, that a 1-year term to OPSPA really wouldn't give the person enough opportunity to get to know the system and so on, but certainly is an option.
Yeah. For example, if I were the voting delegate and you were happy with me, then I guess you would have the option of re-electing me at every year. So, would that satisfy you, Trustee McPherson?
I would counter with that the role of chair in itself is complicated with a learning curve. And yet we deem the role of chair to be one that is elected annually. I think that in all fairness, what I see here is the crux of the matter is we're moving from an appointment to an election. That is the major change.
Trustee Cartner, thank you.
In the structure of OBSPA, my observation is working on the committee that I've been on for the last few years, which I'm not on anymore, but I'm finding that you've got to build up relationships within the organization with the other trustees that are there. If you have the intentions of moving through the ranks of OBSPA, for instance, if you're going to run for the regional vice chair and chair, you need to have acceptance by the other people in your region to show your leadership skills. And it's a little different than sitting at the board table where it's on, you know, two meetings a month and you're out into the public that is voting for you. But the only chance you have to talk to the other trustees in Ontario is at the OBSPA Board of Directors meetings. It's just a comment that if you're going to go through the ranks of OBSPA, it's good to have that experience under your belt, being part of OBSPA. And I can't argue with that being in the position of a chair or vice chair.
Trustee McPherson.
As my dad would say, let's split the difference. Make it a 2-year term.
Trustee Cram, it's your motion. Trustee Richards?
No, it's the actual motion. It's Trustee Cartner's right now. It's the amendment.
All right. Well, I'm getting the feel whether or not we're going to go with that amendment. So you're saying to keep it 4 years. You're saying to go 2. You're saying 1. Director.
Mr. Chair, it is from Secretary of the Board of you. You have a motion on the floor and you have an amendment, so the board would need to make a decision about the amendment first, and then either pass it or dispose of it, and then re-engage the conversation.
Thank you, Director. So do I have that in front of me?
The amendment.
The original amendment. Is that number 2?
Amendment number, or bylaw 4 or 5.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is the motion of... Pardon me? Voting? Is it an alternate voting delegate? It's not. It's
The
just
alternate is not voting.
not voting.
But
So it's
voting-
just an alternate directors take voting out of it. Okay, thank you. All right, so this, correct me if I've got this wrong, but this is how I believe it is, that this is moved by Trustee Cram, seconded by Trustee Richards, that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the Board Bylaw 4.15 with the addition of number 7, election of the Ontario Public School Board Association Office of Voting Director, and 8, election of the effective of the Ontario Public School Board Association Office of Alternate Director, effective December the 1st, 2018, for the term of the board. Amendment, correct on that?
Except for the mover and seconders.
I had that, Trustee Cram and Trustee Richards.
I'm
Oh, you're now the mover of the amendment.
the amendment.
Totally lifted. Yes.
The only difficulty I have with that wording is would be that it looks like the alternate's a 4-year term and the voting delegates and the delegates not. I think you would need to have the for the term of the board under both 7 and 8.
We'll just put the word each for the term of the board?
Each, yeah.
That's the intent.
Yes, Director.
Mr. Chair, we need to confirm who's the seconder.
I do have to confirm that, so we've, now,
We have a mover and we need a seconder.
so the mover
No,
is?
you can't. He was a mover,
You
the
were moved.
original.
So it was Trustee Richards? No, it was
No.
Trustee McAllister.
Of the
Of the amendment?
Yes.
It was mine and
Trustee Cartner and
McAllister.
Trustee McAllister. All right. All right. So, moved by those two, that the Upper Canada District School Board amend Board Bylaw 4.15 with the addition of number 7, election of the Ontario Public School Board Association Voting Director, and election of the of the Ontario Public School Board Alternate Director, effective December the 1st, 2018, each, for the term of the board for each position. And I should have voted on that first. Let's see where we go with that. Not coming up yet. You're going to have to have a show of hands. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm in favor.
5, 6. Thank you. That carries.
That's Mr.
Trustee McPherson's not opposed. Everyone else is in favor. And that carries. Thank you very much.
Now the original amendment, now the original.
Now the
motion.
original motion. Which is,
That's just the same thing, so you just have to vote again, because that was just the amendment.
That's right.
Oh, and I have the yay, nay in front of me, so we're good. Okay, so now I'm going to the original, that's the top one I'm reading again?
What's in front of us now? The amendment?
Same thing.
All right. You've got highlighted? Thank you. At the upper, this is the motion by, back to the original, okay, Trustee Cram and Trustee Richards, that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the board bylaw 4.15 with the addition of number 7, election of the Ontario Public School Boards Association representative, and number 8, election of the Ontario Public Boards Association's alternate representative, effective December 1st, 2018. I'm going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm not sure what this vote is connected to. So a show of hands. And Trustee Swan, in favor?
I'm a little confused on this one, so I'm just
We
abstaining.
just did the exact same thing again, so it's the same motion, but because I had to go back to the original motion, but it's the same thing. You in favor?
So it's a 4-year term for both.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm in favor.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson, you opposed? You're in favor?
Not this time around.
You're in
I know when I'm on a losing horse.
That's okay. No. All right, that carries. Trustee Jacobs, are you there?
Yes.
You in favor?
Favor.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Trustee Cram. I can always count on you for keeping me on the straight and narrow. And the rest of you for doing it. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next. The Director of Education's Work Plan Status Report, number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, trustees, as you've read in the report this evening, senior staff have an obligation to report back to the board about the progress of the Director's Work Plan, which is based on the Board of Trustees strategic plan and the Board of Trustees work plan itself. There are 3 reports that were done since its commission in September of 2017, and this is report number 3. What staff wish to bring back to you is several things. First of all, to tell you about the progress in the plan since its commission, and our last update, trustees will recall, was in February of this year. Secondly, to speak to some specifics about the work that's underway, and lastly, to offer a brief summary about the progress in the 4 goals that the work plan is addressing during this year. As trustees will see from the status report, in the 4 areas, goal number 1, the graduation rate increasing by 2% during this academic year. It fits with the board's mission of preparing all students for a successful life. We had a recent check-in, board members will recall, at the end of April 25, when Superintendent Dawes and Superintendent Coombs provided you with some information about not only about the grad rate, but specifically how we were trying to tackle the 2% increment that we were targeting for this year. Board members will be pleased to know that we are on target in this goal, as evidenced from the April presentation from Superintendent Coombs and Dawes. And it's all items that are action items in this goal are either progressing or sorry, I should say they're all progressing and well under the way given the timelines that have been set. Goal number 2, staff culture. So this is a commitment that the board has made about the employee journey and what it means for us when staff pay attention to how they are valued and how their expertise is engaged by their employer. 3/4 of the goals are progressing at this time, and all have commenced. 100% of the goals are already being actioned. The key part that we'd like to bring back to you is twofold. One is key action number 2, which is a check-in to talk about improving communication with staff, including where are we at in terms of this work plan, and where is the board at in terms of executing its strategic plan for this year. These are one of the highlights of my role since the work plan has been brought into play. And it really is quite rewarding to see the very diverse group of employees that we're connecting with, teachers, principals, EAs, office workers, our custodial group and facilities group, our central staff employees here at the board office, who are giving us very timely feedback about what they hear and see regarding crew. What it does also confirm is that we have quite a significant level of interest, not just here at the board level, but in sites beyond the board around what we're doing about our strategic plan and our director's work plan. Evidence of that would be when Mr. Mills and I visited Lynn Public School in front of Young Public School last week. And what was quite interesting for me to see was how both schools had engaged a personal connection to crew. In one of the schools, Lynn Public School, that crew was present in each of the classrooms, and in some cases asking students to ask how they see collaboration, using resources, committing to an education program, and committing to well-being. So I want the board to know that it's at all levels, classroom, schools, and school district. And so I do think that this goal is well on its way, and we have every reason to believe that the goal will be accomplished and executed in its totality. Goal number 3 is of deep interest to the board, of course, because we're talking about students and self-care. Schools are places of rigorous care and attention, as the board knows, and each of these actions speaks to promoting positive mental health for our students, enhancing school ability to function and focus on, with clarity, the elements about mental health and positive mental health. The board can expect at its next meeting in early June an update on staff, for example, on key action number 1, coming through Superintendent Allen with some assistance from Superintendent Barrett, because we are focusing this year on building in our school improvement planning a focus on improvement in student well-being. An example of that would be today when Superintendent Allen and I were at North Stormont Public School, and the principal presented the wellness strategy, which was brief calming activities after recess so that students could refocus on academic tasks after their nutrition break. What I saw there was an example of how the school identified what was wellness and what was a focus on wellness that would be of benefit to the students. How do we track that? How do we look and to ensure that it's actually happening on the ground? And do we notice a difference in our students? I do laud all of our schools who are investing in these goals. You heard this evening through the presentation from Principal Bourne at South Edwardsburg Public School, his goal focusing on self-regulation and supporting students to ensure that they are able to manage and deal with their social-emotional capacity as part of being at school during over the course of the school day. For the large majority of these actions, they are either beginning or progressing. But I do want to point to key action number 2 that's being shepherded by Superintendent Ron Ferguson, that it's a goal that has been achieved. And that's important to us as well, because as a board we are trying to confirm student voice and understand how is the student experience based on the use of Tell Them For Me survey, and what are we learning from that experience and planning to support students as part of what we do at schools, not just at one school, but in all schools across the board. In this case, as was in the other 2 goals as well, staff believe that we are on target, and we are certainly well within our budget. The last item, Mr. Chair, just as a highlight, is about goal number 4, which is community and connecting with community stakeholders. The Upper Canada District School Board is a community-based organization tasked with caring and teaching children and youth. And we know that in the community we have others who are also either aligned with that kind of mandate or have compatible mandates that make sense, where we want to partner and commit to work together in terms of what the board's trying to deliver and particularly in terms of the board trying to deliver on its mission of supporting all students and preparing all students for a successful life. You've heard this evening from Superintendent Dawes and our Manager for Communications that there are already steps underway that dovetail nicely with this. Again, I would like to point to the board that in all areas we have already begun this work, and in 3/4 of the areas we are progressing in this work at this time. Again, I'd like to highlight key action number 4, because the board has been very explicit to us about making sure that we are building partnerships with local agencies and business leaders and other people who are aligned with our work. And I point to the 4 areas or 4 partnerships that the staff are exploring right now with York University, St. Lawrence College, Leeds Grenville Public Health, as well as with the WE organization and the Aquatarium in town here in Brockville. It is at the beginning stages, though, because what is really clear is that as we work with different organizations, they have different timelines, different organizational culture, and different authorization processes. So it will take a bit more time. As a matter of fact, I do believe that it will take the full 12 months to have some clarity about what those commitments are, but they're commitments that are good for our schools and great for our students. So I do want to thank the board for having that as part of their strategic plan, and to assure the board that the staff is engaging and executing that focus in a very vigorous way. Mr. Chair, I'll turn that back over to you and to the trustees to see if they have any questions for me or the staff about how we're trying to action our own work plan as a senior staff, and how it's bringing the work and the desires of the board to fruition.
Thank you very much, Director. We'll open it up to comments or questions. I guess there are none. Thank you. Well, Trustee McAllister.
Comment. I appreciate the updates.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to the next, which is the Director of Education's quarterly report to the board, number 3.
Mr. Chair, in case trustees didn't hear enough from me in round 1, round 2 is all about a requirement under the board's policy 1001 that requires the director to report back to the board quarterly about the top 3 achievements from the last 3 months, the top 3 challenges in the coming 3 months, and the top 3 priorities to focus on in the next month. So there's both a graphic organizer, and then there is a summary of the achievements, challenges, and priorities in a matrix form, cross-referencing the key priorities that the board had as part of the hiring of their new director in June 2015. I wanted to speak to each of those thirds, just to make sure that the board knows where we're landing, and in case they would like a few more detail. The top 3 achievements tonight for the initial implementation of the director's work plan during the 3rd quarter. That was the previous presentation, and I hope that the board is getting an impression that that work plan is a very authentic part of what all staff do in their work. Evidence of that this evening, for instance, would be the reference that Superintendent Dawes made in the presentation this evening. Without coaxing or coercion, that was a natural moment that the board saw tonight. And I would certainly encourage the board that when they are visiting our schools to look for evidence of crew that's up on the walls, and how our own schools are trying to own crew and our goals around the work plan. The achievement about hiring and onboarding a new superintendent of business, that's a critical role in our organization. And I do thank the Board of Trustees and the hiring committee for addressing this priority and making this a reality for us. We had a budget discussion this evening, and it wasn't the first discussion, it was a series of many. And this is critical work for achieving the financial and operational goals of the organization. The budget is certainly a map of the board's strategic plan, and it's an outline of the organization's planned and future activities, many of which you saw on the slides this evening. When I talk about the top 3 challenges that I see ahead over the next 3 months, not a ranking, by the way, of priority or preference. It's just simply to outline for the board what I see around the corner over the next 3 months. The board has some significant work to do around the next level of work for implementing the Provincial Equity Action Plan. That's a 3-year roadmap that the province has created for all school boards in Ontario, Upper Canada District School Board included, and it has some significant focus for program, for hiring, and for policy and program development. The second priority is not new to the board, I should say second challenge, not new to the board, and it's identifying key considerations for a review perhaps in the next academic year for special education within the UCDSB, and to present these considerations to the board. Mr. Chair, as you know, the board's model of special education and its special education plan is about using the available resources to provide special education programs and services of the highest possible quality, and the senior staff wants to make sure that we commit to that based on how we budget and making sure that we serve all children well, including children with special needs. The board's special education plan also speaks to the need to make sure that the board and its staff obtains appropriate funding and reports on expenditures for special education. We do that through SEAC. We do that through the board meetings itself. But it's very clear that the board is experiencing some pressures since the ministry's funding has changed, and we need to bring back to the board what are those pressures, how should we be addressing that in light of the board's commitment through its special education plan, and how can we ensure that the board can ensure that it's in a positive place when it's trying to address special education programming given its costs and its priorities in this board. And lastly, a priority and also a challenge, because it's time sensitive, is making sure that we meet time sensitive commitments related to the pupil accommodation review. Superintendent Mills and Superintendent Hobbs particularly are tasked with this because we're addressing school closures and consolidation in Brockville. Superintendent Coombs is also involved with this with Superintendent Hobbs and Superintendent Backstrom about school consolidation in the Wolford area and what that will mean for schools in the Smiths Falls area and surrounding communities. And we want to make sure that we do this well and that we serve the community's needs specifically. Added to that, of course, is a large item that is about the closure of our program commitments in the General Vanier site, and again, work that Superintendent Hobbs and Superintendent Mills are addressing because it's also a time-sensitive one because of our commitments related to the Memorandum of Understanding and the sale of that property to the co-terminus board. Lastly, Mr. Chair, I just want to highlight the new, which is our top 3 priorities as we move ahead. What's really critical for staff is to make sure that we have clarity from the board about its own work plan for 2018-2019, and knowing that we're moving towards the end of the year. One of our priorities as your director and as your secretary of the board is to bring that back to the board and to make sure that it has face time on agendas, either through accountability framework and or at the board level, so that senior staff has clarity about what is it that the board desires in terms of where it places its energies and resources for its work in 2018-2019, and how should the senior staff respond to that for the next iteration of the director's work plan. That speaks to the priority that follows, that from June to early September, senior staff will need to revise its work plan based on the board's work plan, and it's been very helpful and very important to offer guidance and direction to the staff and where it places its energy and intelligence and its resources. And I do thank the board for continuing to commit to that kind of concept of strategic planning and work planning so that the staff has a vision and a direction on how to move forward in the next academic year. And then lastly, the Board of Trustees know that we have a retirement on the senior team, and we'll need to address that very large vacancy that we're going to have based on the great work that Superintendent Allen has done over her past many years with the senior team. We do have an interview and hiring committee scheduled for Monday the 28th of May, and I thank the chair for organizing the hiring committee that will be critical for filling that vacancy. So, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you to see if there's any questions from the trustees right now about those 3 achievements, 3 challenges, or 3 priorities.
Thank you, Director. Comments or questions from the trustees? Trustee Carter, go ahead.
It's great to see a plan laid out to that and achievements happening as we move along. It's just a great idea of getting us moving forward, I think, personally.
Thank you. Any other comments? I thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we haven't heard very much from you tonight, Director. Do you have any closing remarks?
Just one, Mr. Chair. It's how much time can a director really ask of a board meeting? I think this might be it.
You're already over the limit.
Yes,
So far.
I sense that. So I'll keep it brief. As you know, Mr. Chair, it's we have many of our students in grade 3 and 6 addressing provincial assessments this week, next week, and into the first week of June. We wish them a great success. Superintendent Allen and I were in North Stormont Public School, as I said earlier, and we noticed the care and attention that students were giving to the assessment. We were right near a classroom when they exited after the assessment today, and students felt both pride and relief. I think it would be a good way to phrase that, and writer's cramp was one student had reminded us how they felt after the experience, but we know that they were well supported. They had great preparation, not just in the weeks preceding the test, but as part of doing the Ontario curriculum. So I know that our students are going to do their very best, and we do certainly wish them luck and thank our staff for supporting them during this process.
Thank you, Director. My comments really are quite simple. We're moving into June. It's a stressful time for everyone. For some reason, schools do everything at the last minute, seems to be. It's a time when our teachers are pulling their hair out, our principals are going crazy, our superintendents are all over the place, our directors everywhere, our trustees are trying to keep up with what's going on. It's a huge, we've got graduations, we've got everything happening, and it all happens at once. And I just want everyone to really take a chance to find some balance over the last month. It's not easy to find that balance, but I was looking out my office window today, and I was looking at a couple of our superintendents out for a stroll with their shorts on, and I thought, yeah, they know how to find balance. Even if it's just a short walk, just take some time for yourself. Health has become such an important issue, and I think our board is aware, probably more than other boards, of what can happen when health issues come in. It's so important that we're there for each other. And I know one of our trustees is going through some challenges, and another is as well. I want them to know, and I want all of you to know, that we're always there for each other. And I think, Trustee McPherson, you said something tonight that kind of struck a chord with me. I think at one time this board may have been split in terms of bringing all of these boards together to try to become one. But it is evident to me, especially in the last almost 8 years, that we are a board. And we think like a board, we act like a board, and we support each other like a board, and that's important. So all of us, trustees, senior team, I know the work the senior team has put into the budget presentation and the meetings that you've had and the tough decisions you've had to make. Try to find some balance. And if it has to be with your kids, then find it with your kids. If it's a walk, whatever it is. I thank everyone for what they do. You do important work. Okay, I need a motion that the regular meeting and public session of the Canada District School Board, May the 23rd, be adjourned at 9:37. The next regular meeting is scheduled for June the 6th, 2018. Moved by Trustee Richards and seconded by Trustee, nobody wants to second it. Trustee Paul McPherson, show of hands. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.